Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from Super Soul Farm, this is Wisdom of the Sages, your daily yoga podcast with your host, Raghunath, and co-host and senior educator at the Bhakti Center in New York City, Kaustubha Das. Welcome to our show. Welcome to Wisdom of the Sages. We do this every day, except yesterday, where we took our first day off ever. And I don't know if anybody was completely lost like I was without Wisdom of the Sages, but I was wandering around aimlessly on the streets just looking for friends. It was like, that's like, what do I do without Wisdom of the Sages? Mara, did you get any of that? Did you feel a little like, who am I? Why am I here?
Yeah, I felt aimless yesterday.
You felt aimless. Good. Good to know I'm not alone.
Did you find any friends out there, Raghunath?
I just hugged trees. I didn't. Today is a special day. Yesterday was our all-day program we do with Radha Swami annually. It was really, in all honesty, I wasn't expecting to be that good because I'm sick of the Zoom yoga class thing that's going on constantly, and I get it. We got to make a living, and but I'm hearing this pandemic. I'm really excited to talk to Rukmini about this. I'm hearing the pandemic for me is to say, do less. You've been doing too much. Almost like when you get sick, and instead of like just resting and drinking tea, you start chugging NyQuil. And I got to work. That's how I'm taking the pandemic as rest, get some tea, talk to your kids. You know, love people more, you know, connect with your wife. That's sort of what the message I'm hearing. I'm really want to pick Mother Rukmini's brain about this, but yesterday was a...
Sorry.
You are allowed to do whatever you want because I just keep talking. I'm like a boulder down a hill.
Okay. To me, it's like humans are in cages and wildlife is roaming free. And it's almost like, I know Gauravani, when his kids act out, then he gives them a timeout. I don't know if all parents do that, but it's go to your room and think about what you did. And when you can act like a human, you can come out. So, you know, that's what it's like to me. That's like a timeout. But think about it. And I've also been thinking about which face of the goddess do you want to be seeing? Do you want to see the angry face? When you're acting out, she's got to pull out all her arms and her weapons, or do you want to see the smiling, blessing hand where she's dancing and everybody's in harmony? Which face, you know? So that's what I think.
Which face of the goddess?
Yeah, which face of the goddess do you want to see, humans? You know, because someone sent me a picture of a moose walking down the street in Warsaw, Poland, and then these whales are spouting in what was the biggest offshore oil drilling place off the coast of Mumbai. And then, yeah, the Yamuna River's running free, the Ganga's blue, the skies are blue, you can see the Himalayas for miles around. And also there was, in Boulder, Colorado, there was a mountain lion just sleeping on a tree, like right off the edge of Pearl Street, which is the downtown of Boulder, Colorado. So all these things that, you know, ducks and geese walking down the down. Oh, someone sent me a picture of this deer on the beach at Puri, where there's usually thousands of people walking around. So this deer is running back and forth on the beach. So I'm feeling like, wow, what's the message here? Which face do we want to see? We want to exist in harmony, you know, and see that beautiful blessing hand, blessing face, dancing, smiling in Sangha, the male and the female, you know.
My fear, Rukmini ji, is that we're going to go right back to drinking the NyQuil, though, and like running around like crazy. As soon as they like, okay, you're free.
Yeah.
Then we're going to go right back to hell. That's my fear. What do you? Yeah. Anyway, we have to introduce you. Let us introduce you, dear.
All right.
Rukmini Walker is our special guest on our Sunday interview day. She's an activist in the field of women's spiritual empowerment and interfaith dialogue. Important stuff. She's the founder of the Urban Devi Collective, based out of the Bhakti Center in New York City, where she is a member of the board of directors. She's been traversing the path of Bhakti for most of her life and is one of the first disciples of Prabhupada. So that's Radha Swami's guru, Srila Prabhupada, and who first brought this whole Bhakti path to the West in 1965. She's featured in a film, Women of Bhakti, Rukmini writes, teaches, and leads workshops and retreats internationally. The kirtan artist, Gauravani, is her son. Our beloved Gauravani, who's been on the show as well, is her son. Together, they lead Bhakti immersion kirtan adventures to India each year. She lives in Washington, D.C. area, where she and her husband lead a Vaishnav Christian dialogue. I didn't know that. And a Vaishnav Muslim dialogue. I didn't know that. Rukmini sees the world animated by spirit and practices an eco-bhakti, seeing truth and beauty in nature and in the world as kindred spirits. That is beautiful. You are beautiful, Rukmini.
Thank you.
I want to know all about you today. We're going to pick your brain, and you have a lot of insight. And it's Mother's Day, and you're a grandmother. You have generations of bhakti children. You have a whole bhakti dynasty. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. You do too, Raghunath. You have a beautiful bhakti dynasty.
It's a small dynasty.
When I was at Super Soul Farm, I saw your daughter feeding little berries to this mother hen who was nesting. She was sitting on her eggs, and your daughter found her in the woods somewhere and was feeding her berries while she was nesting. Beautiful image for Mother's Day.
It is. She's a mother in training.
She brought a little chicken on the show the other
so I
day.
let her feed the guinea fowl.
She brought a little chicken on the show the other day.
Oh.
She brought a little chicken on the show. She's a bird whisperer.
So Rukmini, could we start by just hearing, you have this interesting story because you were very young when you took to this path of bhakti, and you did it in kind of a bit of a radical way. I think were you 15 years old when you left home, or was it 16?
Yeah, my sister and her dear husband, my sister Susan, her dear husband George are sitting here.
I can see them.
Yeah, I caused a lot of pain to my family. I was very radical.
How old were you?
So I left home when I was 15. And then I met Srila Prabhupada and his disciples in San Francisco. I met the devotees in San Francisco at that early San Francisco.
This was 1967?
1968. I met them.
You left home at 15 years old?
How old's your daughter, Raghunath?
15 years old. She just turned 15 2 days ago. Now I'm upset at her.
That's a Gauravani.
You both broke your parents' heart.
I did.
Yeah. Oh my God.
They suffered a lot, but I was able to circle back and give them the path of bhakti later on in life, so that was beautiful also. But yeah, I broke their hearts. I really broke my sister's heart, my dear sister. She was my, mate in all play and all crime, and I broke her heart also. But yeah, so back to San Francisco. So this group of devotees, they were about to leave for London. And this is the group of 6, along with the tiny 2-year-old baby. They that makes 7. Yeah. So they were about to go to London and meet the Beatles, meet George Harrison. So I went with them to Montreal, where they were going to get Prabhupada's blessings. He was there at that time. And so I was with them, and I got initiated there. And then they stayed for a little while, and then they went on to London.
Madam, you're breezing right through that important information. You went to Canada and met the Beatles?
No, Raghu, pay attention.
No, I didn't.
Did she meet the Beatles? That's my.
I did actually. A little while later, John Lennon and Yoko Ono came to Montreal to do the Give Peace a Chance, that bed-in.
Yeah, you were there for that?
Yeah, I was there.
Whoa.
What's the bed-in? What's the bed-in?
Raghunath. Come on, get with it today.
I got into punk rock. I missed rock and roll completely.
You don't know anything about
I went right to the Sex Pistols.
Yeah, so at a certain point, they wouldn't let John Lennon into the U.S. because he was so radical. So he went to Montreal and rented a room, some suite in the Queen Elizabeth's Hotel. And he invited this group of devotees from the temple. And we all had a kirtan in his bedroom. They were in their pajamas, and we had a kirtan. He was singing "Give Peace a Chance." That was his deal, right there.
You were in John Lennon's hotel room chanting with him?
Yes.
That should be on the advertisement for this show. Come meet the woman who chanted with John Lennon in his hotel room.
You know what? Also, what's really cool, and you got to tell us where people can find this, Rukmini, but there's this video of you with like a whole lot of devotees, like 15 devotees. Was it the David Suskind show?
Oh, that's so embarrassing.
Are you kidding me? You stole the show. There's like about 20 people on that stage. You were like 16 years old and you stole the show for sure.
That's such a lot.
Goravani can Google that up and post the YouTube
Oh,
link, please, for the.
Yeah, we
Anyway,
got to see that.
we were all very innocent and wide-eyed, and David Suskind was really funny. He was really quite funny.
That was 68 also, 69 maybe?
No, that must have been maybe, I don't know, 1972 or something.
Oh, okay. Okay. But, you know, I just want to share, you know, when we invited you on the show, you mentioned to me that you assumed that it was because it was Mother's Day. And I said to you, no, actually, that was just a coincidence. You know, it just so happened, although it is ideal that we have you here on this day.
Yeah.
You know, I respect you. I have so much respect for you for so many reasons. And among them is that you are one of these people that pioneered bhakti in the Western world, because here you were, a 15-year-old, just giving your life. I mean, you know, just like you and those early followers of Srila Prabhupada, you just put everything aside and said, our life is to serve. And the only reason why people like myself and Raghunath and so many of us even know anything about this is because people like you sacrifice so much. So I just want to share that respect that we have for you. And we could go on for a long time about hearing the stories in your stories with Prabhupada and the adventures that you had then. And I think we should do that. But we only have so much time. And I really want to talk about Urban Devi, you know, this really important program that you're doing out of the Bhakti Center. And then see where that conversation goes, because, you know, even where you began talking about like which face of the goddess do we want to see, I think it would be really great for ourselves and our guests to hear about issues around women, you know, and understanding your perspective as a woman having gone through, you know, your life practicing bhakti. So could we, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing that I think is so interesting about this conversation is that, well, one thing I love about bhakti is the balance of the masculine and feminine energy.
Yeah. Okay.
And one thing as I said, I love about this conversation is that so often it's the men who have the more attuned, more harmonious, more intuitive, more empathic natures than some of the women. So I find that really interesting. You know, you look at advanced people on the spiritual path, both men and women, they have the intuition, the empathy, the compassion, those softer qualities that are so beautiful.
I think you're being tricky with us. You're saying that so that more of it will come out of us. It's like you're.
No,
she's doing this thing where
she's trying to see something that we can't, we're not, to bring it out in us.
No, I was thinking this morning, I was thinking about Raghunath, that he seems like, you know, such a tough yoga guy, you know.
Tough yoga, one of those tough yoga guys.
Yeah, he seems like such a tough, you know, martial arts yoga guy.
Okay.
But actually, you know, I've heard him say that when he wakes up in the morning, he says to Krishna, what will you have me do today? What, you know, please tell me what, you know, how I can please you today.
Well, and that's not all. You know, I can tell you more about him. Is that not everybody knows this. I've been sharing this secret openly, but I'm convinced that his Svarupa in the spiritual world is that he's an elderly gopi. That's
so funny. Well, you know, people say that about my husband and I, that, you know, he has more of like a grandmotherly energy, and I have more of a grandfatherly energy.
Really?
Like, yeah, he's more empathic and intuitive, and he's a much better listener. And I'm more, you should do it this way. You should do it this way. So, you know, it's interesting.
He must be really good then. I'm going to have to spend a little more time with him. But before we get into all that, and I'm really eager to, could you share with us, what is Urban Devi?
Okay, Urban Devi, it was conceived in order to uplift the voices of women on the path of bhakti, women on the spiritual path. And, you know, so often when we're hearing classes and so many Zoom classes and often kirtan, so many so often it's the voices of the guys. So
Yeah.
Urban Devi was conceived to uplift the voices of the women and hear their realizations, and just sort of try to go to the woman's voice, go to the heart space. It's about to me, it's about Bhakti's transition from India to the West. What happens when a tradition is born in one place and emigrates to another place, and what's happening in the 21st century and in the minds and the hearts of women on the spiritual path, on the path of Bhakti.
That's great. Now, so it's a women's discussion group?
Well, sometimes men also come in.
Are we allowed to come in?
Yes. Sometimes I get protests, but sometimes they're the voices. So I don't know.
So
Can I
you
come
let
into
us in?
the women's circle?
I
Just share?
thought we weren't allowed in.
Well, we had this one guy from Moscow who kept dropping in, and some of the ladies were saying, "Hey, this is our space, so tell him no." So I don't know. For me,
So what happened in the end?
Well, for me, it doesn't matter, but I'm trying to respect
tell you-
that sacred space.
Okay, let's respect your sacred space, and us men will just stay out.
We're going to have a men's circle. How about that?
We're going to start one up. So how many people are participating in Urban Devi?
It's a couple thousand right now. I mean, between Facebook and the Urban Devi blog, urbandevi.com. Please check out urbandevi.com, and you can sign up and get the blogs we send out. And we have monthly sanghas that have now gone to Zoom. So the next one's coming up from the Bhakti Center. It's going to be May 31st. Please join, and it'll be a conversation like you guys do. So I'll be interviewing Ananda Vrindavan, who's my friend and our temple president here in our community president here in Washington area.
Mm-hmm.
She's an interesting person. She's Irish, very interesting. So we'll be having a conversation. So yeah,
That's on the 31st of May?
I think it's Sunday, May 31st.
Okay, so to hear that or to find out anything else about Urban Devi, people can go to urbandevi.com.
Yes.
Right? Urban Devi, urbandevi.com.
Yes, and there's a Facebook page and a blog site and everything.
Well, I hear such great things about it. I see that so many ladies are so enthusiastic about it.
Well, sometimes people say that in a group of men and women, the women sometimes don't speak their minds.
Mm-hmm.
I heard that from Madeleine Albright when she was a professor. She was saying in a co-ed college class, the men would seem to dominate and the women wouldn't, express their thoughts. So it's sort of a sacred space where people can bring out their thoughts and struggles and challenges and realizations, and yeah.
Very good. And there's a blog and everything too.
Yes, the blog, we send out blogs every few days. We try to not overpower people, but yeah, our thoughts on what's happening in the world, our realizations or challenges, or sometimes we share poetry, and I'm trying to make it not just my voice, but the voices of others. So we have something coming up this week, a little meditation on spring that was written by my sister Susan and her husband George. They live in nature in Maine. So that's something really beautiful that'll be coming up this week. So yeah, every couple days.
Right. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Susan's on the show every day on our Zoom group. There she is.
Yep. So now,
Broke her heart, but her heart came back together when she met Radha Swami and these beautiful devotees in Mumbai.
When you left home.
Well, I kind of shattered her heart, and then she thought, well, what is this? And then she came to India. She was doing volunteering at Bhaktivedanta Hospital. She's an acupuncturist.
Yeah.
She was coming and doing her magic work there and met wonderful people. So they reignited her heart.
You did what you had to do,
You had some calling. We were talking about this yesterday. You have a calling and you have to answer that calling.
Well, really,
and if you don't, what do? You just try to please your parents, please your relatives. If you try to please everybody, they're never going to be happy anyway. You got to find out that deep calling and please God. That's the highest calling.
So if Sachi feels the calling, she should go.
You know what? Yes.
Oh,
yes. And I will be sad and it will break my heart and I'll get it.
Well, I'll take
if it's a spiritual calling, because sometimes people go off and blow off their parents and blow off their family for completely mundane calling. But for the highest calling, that spiritual calling, it's like heartbreaking.
Well,
and
if
it's
you wanna
and it's
send
real.
if you want to send her somewhere, you can send her to me because I really resonate with that young woman. She's so beautiful. But I mean,
Okay, you
frankly,
can have her.
about me, you know, I just couldn't figure out what was going on in the world. I felt like I was dropped from another planet, and I couldn't figure out what people were doing. I remember sitting in the front window of our house and trying to figure out why people were rushing around in their cars, and they're going to work, and they're going to the club, and they're going here, and then they're just going to die. So I couldn't.
Those are important. Those are important questions that you get. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you get at a young age.
Yeah.
And to answer that call, that's big, because some people just like they bury it and they create busyness, the busyness of my university, my degree, my job, my family, and they never go back to that 15-year-old question that you had. Why?
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Kunti Devi, this beautiful personality, one of the great personalities of the Bhagavatam, she talks about high birth, wealth, education, beauty, all these things. She talks about them, how they kind of intoxicate us and sort of lull us to sleep. And then we're unable to call out. We're unable to cry. We're unable to call out the name of Krishna. Very interesting perspective and that's really kind of what's happening in the material world. We kind of dull ourselves down so that we don't think or feel those deep questions. Yeah.
That's you know, that's very interesting, and you know, it kind of leads me into this topic that we've already kind of gotten started on, but I really want to hear from you about. And that is, I've heard you describe bhakti as a feminine path. Mm. And already we're not allowed into the Urban Devi classes.
Yes, I see what's going on here. And what's that T-shirt you mentioned this morning, Kaustubha?
Oh, well, I see people a lot of times they have this shirt that says "The future is female," and I think I understand the thought behind it. But having discussed this with you, I think even more precise might be to say the future is feminine rather than the future is female. Because if there's not men and women, there's not going to be any future. Right? It's definitely going to take us both. But but that there are feminine qualities that both men and women share.
Yeah.
That we may call these qualities feminine, and they may be particularly prominent in women, but that actually all human beings are meant to have them. And is that what you mean by that bhakti is a feminine path? That certainly is for men and women, but there's certain qualities that are really essential to it?
Usually we think of yoga as, you know, attaining the siddhis of yoga, the yogic perfections, you know, anima, lagima, all these siddhis where I can become small, or not me, but a yogi could become smaller than the smallest, or become lighter than a feather, or be able to prapti siddhi, be able to create something in their hand. So these siddhis, it's sort of an ascending path of yoga, whereas bhakti is a descending path of yoga. It's like, I think of the verse from Shakespeare where he says, the quality of mercy is not strained, it falleth as the gentle rain from heaven.
Ah, okay.
Beautiful. And then he says something about it blesses the one who gives and the one who receives.
Sounds like it's talking about bhakti.
Yeah. So bhakti is this descending path of, it's like bhakti is the yoga of grace. It's the yoga of, it's a softer, gentler, going to the heart space instead of the head space, or actually the head space. Knowledge is important also. I was saying this to you, Kaustubha, last couple of days, that knowledge is important and it's foundational. But the goal of knowledge is this sweet relationship of exchanging love in giving and receiving love in bhakti.
So in other words, you're saying that yoga can be understood in different ways, and there are different yogic paths, and some of those paths involve renunciation. They involve austerities, and you're defining these as ascending, like by my power, I'm going to climb the ladder to achieve this higher goal.
Yeah.
And that if I'm not mistaken, that in one sense that kind of energy is a masculine energy. like an aggressive, I'm going to conquer kind of energy.
Well, in a kind of proverbial way that we think of masculine as power and
Yes.
feminine as more yielding. But bhakti is bhakti. It's about opening the heart, and the renunciation on the path of bhakti is about coming to a more positive place of attachment. In other words, in bhakti, we're not focused on giving up the desires of the world or the pleasures of the world, but finding a higher taste in the positive enjoyments, pleasures, beauties of what's spiritual. And another thing I really love about the path of bhakti is this idea that nothing is in and of itself material, but it's the consciousness with which it's used. And my teacher, Srila Prabhupada, would give a really beautiful example that when like when a mother, here's a good one for Mother's Day, that when a mother sees the shoes of her child, she's not just looking at the shoes, she sees the child. In her heart, she's seeing her child.
Yeah.
So someone on the path of bhakti, they see a tree and they think, oh, this is Krishna's tree. Or they see a flower, oh, this flower is meant to be offered to Krishna. You know, they're seeing the world in a connectivity, which I think is very beautiful and holistic. And I think it is the path of the future. I think that, there's this pyramid of power that we have in the world today with humans at the top trying to usurp, trying to control, trying to dominate nature, and the earth and the animals and all living beings kind of put down, developing worlds put down. So I think it needs to be flipped, and I think that's what Lord Chaitanya is saying in his prayers. This beautiful third verse of Lord Chaitanya's Sikshastakam prayers, where he talks about be more tolerant than a tree, be more humble than grass. So it's like uplifting the images of the earth, and that human beings should be in service to the earth and in service to the grass and the trees. And this is what I mean when I say eco bhakti.
Yeah.
And this is a very beautiful thing about the bhakti path. That how can I serve and seeing the interconnectivity, that seeing the soul. That verse from Bhagavad Gita, Radha Swami, I think every time I hear him speak, I think he quotes this verse about how someone in wisdom sees the same soul present in a dog, or a wise person, or a dog eater, or an elephant. So to see that interconnectivity, I think, is very intrinsic to the path of bhakti.
So if I'm understanding correctly, and to tie this all back into the male, female, or the masculine, feminine idea, is that maybe the world's getting screwed up, and we can say that it's certainly, a lot of it is due to a type of mentality that if it's harnessed well, it's very, that aggressive energy, if it's harnessed well, it's helpful, but if it's not, it becomes very destructive.
Right. So if I'm going to harness something, I have to do it in the right consciousness. Like maybe nature needs to be utilized. They're not resources. These are living beings. The earth is a goddess, right? The rivers are goddesses. So it has to be done in the right consciousness. Like I know you and I have talked about this before on the path of bhakti, that when we wake up in the morning, and there's a beautiful prayer that we say to Mother Earth, that you're holding the mountains, you're holding the oceans, the rivers. And please excuse me before I put my foot on you today, please excuse me for putting my foot on you. It's a very beautiful reverence for Earth as a goddess, as a sacred goddess. And then, just thinking of that image of the paradigm of power and flipping it, putting all living beings at the top and myself at the bottom. How can I serve? What can I do in service for you today? It's profound.
Thank you. Yeah. Did you have something you want to share, Raghu? I see you kind of leaning forward.
One thing I would sorry, interrupt.
Raghu just got muted right as he started speak. Mara, what are you doing?
Mara's there's a coup going on. So Bhakti's asking us to reestablish that gentleness that gives the word gentleman that name again. How can I be more gentle? How can, we can't help sometimes because culture drags our men with movies, with Hollywood, with Bollywood, and it sort of like trains us how to behave. What is the untraining we need? Can you give men some advice so we don't continually go on to wreck things?
I think we all need to hear each other more. I mean, the men and the women, and that's for me, it's such a paradox here because, again, so often it's the men who have those abilities, but we have to really tune in and be willing to be changed. Hear better, try to hear better, and be willing to be changed by what we hear. Deep hearing, I think, is a lot. In Bhakti, we have this sacred mantra. It travels in sacred sound. So all these kirtans on Zoom all over the world, going all over the world, the sound traveling in ether is actually purifying the ether, sacred sound. So yeah, hear deeply and be willing to be changed by what we hear, I think it's kind of the aggression versus the ability to yield, which is, present or not present in all of us, right? Or sometimes both are needed. It's interesting. I was also thinking this morning that how Srila Prabhupada talks about how Arjuna was the right recipient to hear Bhagavad Gita. Why? Because of his compassionate nature. That Duryodhana was all ready to, have everyone be killed on his behalf. He wanted to just hold the kingdom, have the power, but he wasn't actually qualified to be the king because of that controlling nature. And someone who was more compassionate would be a qualified ruler who would think compassionately for the welfare of the citizens, the animals, all the inhabitants of the kingdom.
Not only Arjuna, but this conversation, anticipating this conversation and some of what I've spoken with you recently, it made me think of the very beginning of the Bhagavatam. It's the 8th verse in the Bhagavatam. And the sages at Naimisharanya are turning to Sutta Goswami. And they're kind of confused and lost, right? They're trying to figure out how to get something done. They want to help the people of the future. They're trying different rituals and so on. They don't feel like they're really connecting. And then they turn to Sutta Goswami and they say that your gurus have endowed you with all the favors bestowed upon a gentle disciple. And therefore, you can tell us all that you have scientifically learned from them. The word guyam is used there. Gauravo guyam, the secrets of the gurus. They've been given to you because they have this anugraha. They've blessed you with this because you were Somya. And the word Somya means gentle, right? So, and that might be considered more the feminine quality.
You see, it's about mercy falling down. It's about grace coming down. Those qualities, those qualities make someone eligible, right?
Well, so I looked up this word Somya in the Bhagavatam to see where it's used and how it's used. And I found that Shaunaka calls Sutta Goswami gentle, not only in that verse, but 2 more times in the Bhagavatam. When he refers to, "Oh, gentle Sutta Goswami," he refers to him that way. And I found that Narada is called Somya or gentle by Brahma, that Uddhava is called gentle 4 times by Vidura, by Krishna, and by the gopis.
Isn't that
I'm so
beautiful?
impressed by Kaustuba's research.
There's more.
This is what he's doing on his spare time. He's picking out words and researching them.
That
I'm very
Prahlad
impressed.
thank you. That Prahlad is called Somya by his friends, his schoolmates. Very interesting. Akrura is called gentle 4 times by Kamsa, by Krishna, by Kunti, and by Dhritarashtra. All 4, when they refer to Akrura, they say they call him, "Oh, gentle Akrura." Vidura is called gentle twice by Maitreya.
So I think
there's one more though. There's one more.
Okay.
Radharani calls someone gentle.
Really? So that
Bumblebee. The bumblebee, she calls him gentle.
It's interesting because those are all, I think, other than the Radharani reference just now, those are all in reference to men, right?
Well,
Being
Kunti calls, and the gopis, but all the people that were being called gentle were all men.
yeah.
And mostly it was men calling them gentle, although the gopis and Kunti also.
So what's being uplifted here, we're hearing this in the modern day. It's so funny because this is so postmodern, really. We're hearing that vulnerability, this is the real strength. What is a woman looking for in a guy? The ability to be vulnerable, to show his feelings, to really care and not jump to a solution, not try to fix things. And so this is a beautiful instruction in Bhakti that vulnerability is the real strength. So nice.
Well, speaking of instructions in Bhakti and how this plays out, like if we look at the Bhagavatam itself, could you share with me your thoughts about like the speciality of the Bhagavatam and how it also helps make some of these things more clear or certain, I don't know what would be the right word, but how that feminine quality is kind of championed there.
Yeah, what I see in the Bhagavatam that I find so beautiful, and really the Bhagavatam is conversational, just like wisdom of the sages. It's kind of you're following that mood of the Bhagavatam because it's a conversation within a conversation within a conversation, and those conversations or the stories, or you could say histories, her stories, his stories, they are almost always, I would say, or always uplifting the gentle people, the simple people, the small people, the humble people, and bringing down the high and mighty, bringing down the high caste Brahmins, bringing down the, big universal controllers like Indra or Brahma. They sort of play into Krishna's play. They play into the Leela. Okay, I'm willing to play a fool in this story for the pleasure of my Lord, right? Yeah. So it's all the beautiful, and then little boy Prahlad, he's this charming little boy who just keeps speaking truth to power. Sita is always speaking truth to power. People like to couch Sita's in the Bhagavatam also, and Ramayana, but people like to portray her as a fragile sort of a victim, but she's speaking truth to power. She's strong, and yet she's gentle at the same time. So those two qualities combine in these personalities. It's to me, it's a role reversal where the simple people are being uplifted and the proud are being brought down. That's what we see in the Bhagavatam.
Could you maybe just very briefly share with us this? Maybe what you're describing right now is most evident in the 10th canto, the story of the Brahminas and their wives.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful story. So you have these highly learned, highly educated Brahmins performing a yajna, a sacrifice. And they know all the mantras, they know all the tantras, they know all the yantras, they know everything. It's kind of like, if you kind of look at a biblical comparison, they're kind of like Pharisees in a sense, that they sort of got it all down. They've got all the rituals down. And then what happens is little boy Krishna and his friends are playing in the forest, and they're hungry, and they send some of their friends to go ask the Brahmins, beg from the Brahmins for some of the results from their sacrifice, some of the food that they've offered in sacrifice, that's what sacrifice is, really. It's meant to make sacred, to offer things up to divinity, right? Yeah. So the Brahmins are so tied up in their rituals that they, go away, kids, don't bother us. And they refuse to share the results of their sacrifice. But like Vaidais Chasar Hameva Vedya, the purpose of the Vedas is to know Krishna, is to love Krishna. So they refuse that ultimate goal of the sacrifice. But then what happens is the little boys come back and ask the Brahmins' wives, who are, open-hearted, these beautiful mother figures there. And they so lovingly, let's give everything for the pleasure of Krishna. So then they kind of show their superiority in realization on the spiritual path, realization of bhakti, and also the end of knowledge and the end of knowledge, because knowledge is meant to open the heart space, to bring us to the path of love. You know, what's hidden in the Vedas, what's hidden in all the scriptures and the Shastras, that essence, that this is the goal. Who do I love? Who will I love? Who must I love?
And then in the end, their husbands recognized, when they see that, they realize, oh, well, we were so stupid. Like our wives understood this so much better.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. The verse that they go, to hell with our yajna, to hell with our mantras and tantras and yantras, to hell with all of it. It's really charming.
We missed the whole point.
We missed the whole point, yeah. So that happens a lot. You know, the wives of Kali's snake, you know, the guys, the snake is an evil dude, right?
Yeah.
And you know, he's just meant to be vanquished, but then, you know, Krishna dances on his heads, and he sort of gets to be more and more humbled and more defeated, and then his heart stops. And sometimes that's what happens to us in life, right? We become defeated and our hearts begin to open. C.S. Lewis talks about this, that maybe suffering in this world is like a clarion call to wake us up, like a, what does he call it? God's megaphone to rouse a deaf world, right? So, you know, he's defeated, and then his wives come out and say, hey, you know, we love you, Krishna. And
Can you take it easy on him?
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't have asked before, but now that he's become more humble, maybe you could forgive him, because he is having a change of heart. And then by the prayers of his beloved devotees, these snake wives, Krishna doesn't kill him. He just says, all right, go. Here, don't come back.
So like you said,
and you'll always be recognized by the imprint of my feet on your head.
So he was blessed.
Garuda the big eagle won't bother you.
You know, you opened up by saying, what face of the goddess do we want to see? Mm-hmm. And so if I understand this correctly, you're saying that all the goddesses, including Durga, right, which is this goddess that, you know, in a sense punishes us, you know, for our own good. That we wake up from all of our ignorance and our cruelty and so on. So that goddess Durga her realm is the material world. And she's got the trident, and it's got 3 points on it that can get you with 3 of the different miseries that this world inflicts.
She's got arms and weapons in every arm.
Tiger, yeah.
Rides a tiger.
Yeah, so that we could see when we are out of touch with our true nature. And that true nature is largely feminine in that sense. It is compassionate. It is soft-hearted, ultimately. Then we meet up with Durga, and she pokes us a bit, and hopefully we get the message. Yeah. Or if we can cultivate this mood that you're describing of thoughtfulness and compassion and sensitivity, gentleness and whatever, that's what opens us up to the higher mercy and connecting with that most beautiful, welcoming, satisfying face of the goddess, which you could say would be, say, Radha, I would suppose. Is that what you're implying?
In fact, on the path of bhakti, it's described that Radha is the pleasure potency of Krishna, and that we are all like the kids. She is the feminine goddess in relationship to the divine masculine, and we are all expanded from that pleasure potency. The goddesses are Shakti, right? And we are also Shakti, and we're meant to give pleasure. Our nature is to be empathic and to be compassionate and to offer our hearts back, offer our love back to the source of all love. And we keep sticking our fingers in the kind of the sweet rice of, we keep making mistakes because we're not getting the message that I'm meant to offer my heart to the source of all love. It's almost like I see it like these concentric circles generating out from a center. So if you think of
Fibonacci spirals, perhaps.
Fibonacci. That's Raghu's favorite thing. I don't know if any of us know what it means.
Can you say
Fibonacci spiral.
Yeah, or if you think of a mandala, like if you think of a three-dimensional mandala with these circles generating out from the center and getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more inclusive. So within that center, there's that, even in the very center of existence, there's this love affair between Radha and Krishna. And we're born out of that love. And then this holistic idea of all living beings being included in the circles of this this generating out mandala of love. It's very profound. This is bhakti. We are all
Rukmini
bhakti.
Bridget, my wife, is out in the garden right now, and she was working, and she sent a message in, which I want to know the answer to, with a question for you. Rukmini Prabhu, curious, where does dharmic masculinity fit in? What's the integrated balance picture of that energy in our time? Balance masculinity with this femininity.
Yeah, I see it in both. I see it when the feminine voices speak truth to power. I see it in the masculine and in the feminine voices. When those small little voices speak out, speak to power. When Prahlad Maharaj, his father asks him, "Where is your God?" Ready to smash him, trying to destroy him, and little Prahlad, in this strong voice speaking truth to power, he says, "My God is everywhere." And then at the end of the story, when the Lord appears to little Prahlad and says, "What can I give you? You've suffered so much on my behalf." Prahlad says, "Please give liberation to my father." So this forgiveness, all these, so both are there. There's the strength and there's the softness, and both are present. I think in an ideal, in an evolved personality, you see both. Radharani's most charming qualities to Krishna are when she's a bit angry, and he becomes so charmed. She's called Man Mohini, when she's charming him by her anger. Or so I think both are there, but it's not about usurping the world and dominating the world. It's, how can I serve you? How can I serve the world as in this interconnected way? I think to me that's the real strength.
Are you saying that our masculine energy, especially in men, but also both in men and women, ideally when it's connected through bhakti, then it becomes, rather than becoming destructive, it's protective, especially? Yeah.
Because it's so interesting, you use the word destructive, but isn't creative energy is the opposite of destructive energy. So we see that creative energy about maintaining and creating art, creating beauty, creating universes. This is all the power of the progenitors, or anyone who creates anything, creating art, creating music, anyone who creates anything. So this is the opposite of that destructive energy, when energy goes and falls into the lower modes of nature, and we start to destroy ourselves and destroy others, right? It's about reversing the chakra energy, right? And sending it up to the heart.
We're a little low on time. There's one question I wanted to throw your way, because I do have so much respect for you, and I see you as a person that, you began practicing bhakti in 1968.
Yes.
So if someone could do the math for me real quick, what is that?
51 years.
51 years.
But
And it's hard to
come to the place of actual practice.
Yeah. It's hard in this day and age, especially following any path for a long time. We become diverted at some point, and there's almost always a point at which we can give it up and justify it. And perhaps, people of our age are especially prone to rationalizing, feeling a victim, rationalizing our somehow a lack of commitment. So when I see someone that can practice a path for such a long time, to me, that's very impressive. And as a woman, I also know that it's very common that within religious or spiritual paths, that an element of misogyny enters into that world. And so very often women do become the victims of that on a spiritual path. And I'm sure that can be incredibly discouraging and difficult to face. So I'm not, and in asking this question, I want to be clear. I'm asking for your own personal way of working through that. Not that there might not be other valid ways. But for yourself, when you face that kind of energy personally, how do you deal with it?
I have to answer that I keep the image of water in my heart, in my mind, the way water finds its source, the way the rivers find their way to the ocean, the way the Ganges flows to the sea, as again, Kunti Devi's prayers in the Bhagavatam, that let my love for you not be diverted, just like the waters of the rivers find their way to the ocean. So personally, I feel like my own personal answer to that question would be, I just go around them. But first, I think it comes from, first of all, having a foundation of what is reality, what is knowledge, what is my identity, that I'm a tiny sacred spark of divinity. I'm tiny, but I'm worthy. So in Bhakti, we have this concept that this seed of Bhakti is in the hearts of every one of us. And it's in an embryonic state, just waiting to fructify, waiting to bloom. So that's who I am. And no misogynist can tell me that I'm not sacred, that I'm not worthy. So this image of like the river, you can throw a truck in the river and the river will go. The river will
That's the
go.
masculine symbol, the truck.
Wow.
Sometimes the truck might be the woman, you know.
Okay.
You just go around and you just find your way to your source, because that's what life is about. That's the purpose of life. Finding our way to our source, finding our way back to our source. Where did I come from? What's my origin? And what is this? What's the source of love? And where can I place my love? Because everything else is going to be taken away, ripped away. You know, I've got my kids, my house, my car, my stuff, and my relatives and my family dynasty and all that. You know, it's all going to be gone, like seaweed in the ocean. It's all going to flow away in a different direction. But there's that one person that I'm meant to love is my dearmost. You know, that just this idea. This is bhakti. Like here's a definition of bhakti: that Krishna, I am yours, and you are mine. Oh my! Like once someone asked my Guru Prabhupada, what should we think when we're chanting the holy name? He said, oh my friend, oh my friend, oh my friend. I think this is Gauravani's favorite definition of the mantra. Oh my friend. Yeah. So I am yours. You are mine, and I am yours, and everything else is going to be ripped away. So to go to that heart-centered place, this is bhakti.
That's absolutely beautiful, and I think that instruction is for both men and women. That idea of how not to, if we're not very conscious, we're going to become our following of a particular path. We're going to get diverted at some point. But there's a wisdom in what you're saying that I appreciate so much. We're running out of time here.
Thank you.
We feel that there's so much more to speak with you about. We're going to have to bring you back. Can you, if we asked you right now, to promise that you'll come back?
I would love that. I would love
Thank you so much.
The wisdom in the heart of the Savior.
Thank you. Maybe we can, Raghu, we can share one more time, urbandevi.com.
I also have a Patreon page, patreon.com, Rukmini Walker.
Patreon.com/Rukmini Walker.
Yes, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. People are asking questions left and right. I know we have a time limit. Next time we want to have you back, please come back.
I would love it. Thank you.
We appreciate you. We love you. We respect you. Tell Gora we said Hari Bol. Thank you for doing what you do and being light in so many people's life. Very grateful. There's so much to learn from you. Thank you.
So much.
Thanks everybody for joining us, and everybody for joining us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher.
It's your favorite one.
It's like saying Stitcher. Thank you for joining us. And if you're listening to Apple Podcasts and you want to join us live on Zoom, we had about 160 people or so on Zoom. You just got to email Mara, executive producer at wisdomofthesages108@gmail.com, and we will let you in the club. Also, if you like what we're doing, we are a listener-supported podcast. So if you want to join our Patreon party, there's a little party going on with Patreon. They all get into it. They have this whole discussion thing, and they're staying in this chamber forever, talking bhakti all day. You can do that at patreon.com/wisdom of the sages. Thanks for all of you who support us. Thanks to everybody who joined late that I didn't say good morning to. Good morning to you. Happy Mother's Day to all the dedicated mothers out there. You are appreciated so much for what you do, and that we have to make a special day where we just sit back and appreciate you. Today's that day. May it bleed into all the other days of the year. Thank you for all that sacrifice and love that you give. Thank you to my mom, Grandma Terry. We love you. She had 7 kids and never had money, and she raised us all. I'm so grateful to my mom. Grateful to Kaustubha and Mara. Thanks. And again, Rukmini, Walker, thank you. And thank you, everybody. Join us later. Time to dance and sing. Thank you for all the people checking in from around the world. And hey, come here. My wife came in. Thanks to my wife of 5. Dedicated to my wife 5. All the future mothers of the world. All the new mothers of the world.
All the elderly gopis, future elderly gopis of the world.
Future elderly gopis of the spiritual world. Thanks to all the Californians who joined us today, who don't usually get to see us.
Ananta Devi has her kids there.
Yeah, thanks for everybody who brought their kids here.
Stephanie's got her kids there. Jiva, where's Dexter?
Jai Jai Shri Radhe, Jai Jai Shri Radhe. We will never remember all the things that our mother's done for us. We'll never remember them. Come here.
We'll never even know.
Look at this. Mother. Hey. And son. Come here, son. Krishna Bala Radhe.